Hi, I'm Cheryl Jackson. I'm joined by Michael Fullan. He's the Special Advisor on Education to Ontario Premier Dalton McGuinty and Minister of Education Leona Dombrowski. His newest book is called All Systems Go, The Change Imperative for Whole System Reform. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, what is whole system reform? What are we talking about?
We're talking about the whole system. 100% of the schools in Ontario, that's 4,900. 100% of the districts, 72 districts. So it's the school and the community, it's the district, it's the province, all interacting, focused in order to make improvement in education. The whole system, or as we sometimes call it, all systems go. Get the whole system going.
Sounds a little Thunderbirds.
Yeah,
all
well, it's a little
go.
action there, motion. Yeah.
Well, it's very macro then, right? You're talking about, is this top down? Is that how
No,
you would describe it?
It's not macro. Actually, we came at it, we've arrived at it in the opposite direction. We started in the classroom, the school, the community, and then said, okay, we've got some innovative schools here and there, but they're not adding up. So then we started to work on district-wide reform, York Region and several others. So we started to see that, and then we said, well, it's not going to go all the way if the province or the state isn't involved, the government. And then when Dalton McGuinty was elected in 2003, he said, I want to do, he didn't use whole system reform language, but he said, I want to transform the system, the public education system. So this work, to be successful, has to be very thoroughly grounded in each and every school, which it is. And so we really have, it's all parts being equally implicated, all three levels being equally implicated and showing up as the new results, the new teaching, and the new outcomes for students at the school level.
What is the goal?
The goal is to improve the achievement of students. We call it raise the bar, close the gap. So this is the moral purpose, sometimes we call it. And raise the bar, close the gap is on, for example, literacy, numeracy, engagement in lifelong learning. So if we take literacy, because everybody can understand that, we are talking about increasing the proficiency, as we have done in the last 7 years, of more and more students so that they can read, critical think, understand, express themselves. These show up in the standards, they show up in the assessments, but then they show up in lifelong learning. We know that students who are more literate earlier, let's say by grade 3, are more likely to graduate and go on to university or other post-secondary. Students that don't get it right by age 8 are destined for problems. So we've tried to make sure that we intervene early, correct as much of that as possible, but the overall result is to have citizens who can participate in not only in Ontario, but in Canada and globally, as articulate, responsible citizens.
So what are some of the changes you have to make to ensure that that happens?
You have to have improved teaching in the classroom, improved in terms of the pedagogical or teaching practices that get the better results. You have to have better use of data, and personalization it's called. You have to know how each student is doing. If you've got 25 children, how are each and every one of them doing? And those that aren't doing so well, by name, what do we do with that problem? So we're tying together this better focused on the individual with knowledge about where that individual is and where they need help, with the particular teaching that actually will get the results. And then all of that is caused by good leadership, good teaching, good literacy coaches, good principals that are helping to orchestrate that.
What are some of the barriers to this kind of change?
Well, there aren't too many, actually. The historical barrier is getting people to, I guess it's trust and respect would be one way of putting it, because there are a lot of sometimes we've said about teachers, behind the classroom door, or sociologists say the privatization of teaching. So teaching as a profession has grown up as, I'm the teacher and this is the class and this is my domain. In order for this whole system reform to work, you have to open the classroom door metaphorically, and teachers have to see each other teaching, be helped to improve in that. So that's a bit scary at the beginning if that's not a practice. So our practice of collaboration has changed the culture of the school towards greater working together. And the biggest barrier was reducing the fear factor that teachers would have about doing that.
So they wouldn't be blamed if they tried something, they were allowed to take some risks? Is that what you're talking about?
That's right. We have, for example, if you take the word accountability, which is all over all systems in the world, We have deliberately, I'm talking about the Premier, the Minister, myself as advisor, all of us have said, we are going to go light on judgment. We want transparency and openness, we want accountability, but we're not going to go around blaming teachers, otherwise they'll close the door again. It's unfair to blame them anyways if you haven't had a chance to help develop it. So we've said, go light on judgment and go heavy on capacity building.
Now you have experts here, that's fine,
Yeah.
you have experts here from all over the world.
Right.
How different are systems around the world, really?
Well, this is part of the international comparison. We have Andrea Schleicher, who's the head of OECD's assessment of comparing countries. And we know that Canada is doing quite well, Ontario is doing quite well in the top 5 in the world. Others, like the United States, have slipped to 20. So we are aware of that interaction. And if we take the countries that are here that are doing well, Finland and Singapore, those are countries that the practices that we're using in Ontario are very similar in those two countries. So we're getting some confirmation that we're all on the right track because we can all see the results. Australia is just a little bit earlier in that process, so that's another question. And then the United States, we have the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, and U.S. is really complex because it's got 15,000 districts and 50 states and all kinds of other problems and 3 decades of poor performance. So they've got a huge uphill battle, but we want him here. Partly because he said we want to learn from Ontario, that's what he said in his speech, but also because quite a few of us are working to help build the education system in U.S. It's, better education systems make better neighbors, if I could put it that way. So this is an international phenomenon, and this particular conference is about people learning from each other, where the evidence is very out in the open and explicit. The evidence of the results and the evidence of how to get there.
Now, a constant debate here in Ontario has been over standardized testing. We've heard some of it here at the conference. We're talking about the EQAO here in Ontario, which we use to measure.
Yeah.
Now, there are some education reformers who think it's the worst thing that could ever happen to education, that we've lost the child in that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you can, if you do it wrong, that is, if you have heavy-handed testing that just hammers the teachers, clearly you lose the teacher as well as the student. But if you look at the data that OECD presented about successful practices, every one of those are using data on student learning, mainly as a strategy for improvement, and that's how we use it. So, we have established that practice of doing that, and it's not all that onerous. If you look at the elementary level, and let's just take junior kindergarten to grade 8, that's 10 years. We do testing in grade 3 and grade 6, so 2 out of 10 years are the EQAO.
Sure, but elementary teachers have asked for a moratorium for 2 years. They don't like it.
Yeah, well, they don't like it, but it's still, first, I'm saying it's not that burdensome anyways, 2 out of 10, but that's not the main point. The main point is it's valuable. And we use it to, as I said, not as accountability only, but mainly to pinpoint what needs improvement. And if you don't have data on all the children and a system of doing something about that, you can't get anywhere.
Sure, but I guess there are different ways to do that as well. Finland does a random test, for instance, which what I think he said they test 10% of the kids. Yeah,
well, that's their accountability measure. That's not their improvement strategy, right? So and Finland is one of the rare countries that don't have. So there's good and bad testing, and I suppose you could say there's no testing. And we know that we've redeployed the use of EQO data. When we started, it was used just as an annual check for people. We've redeployed it as part of our strategy for improvement, and the results have gone up. So the people that are asking for a moratorium have, in my view, have not actually looked at how it plays itself out as an improvement strategy. And that's really the central part, because accountability to the public can be taken care of by the sampling, but even that's not as convincing to the public as full assessment. The public are more assessed. So I think there's no appetite in the public to reduce testing. And our view is, as long as testing is not misused for negative purposes or comparing schools that shouldn't be compared, which we're not doing, as long as it's used primarily as a lever for investing in capacity improvement, then it has a place. And so we're not going to take it away for strategic reasons. We're not going to take it away for let's say, public reasons, because the public wants it, and these days it should be more transparent.
Why should parents care about whole system reform? It's such a big concept. What does it actually mean for their kids?
Well, I don't think they should, in one way, I don't think they should care about it. We are using whole system reform in order to increase the sheer number of children who benefit. So that so this is why it doesn't connect so much to the individual parent. Although I would say we have 20,000 more graduates from high school than we had before these strategies. That's a lot of kids and a lot of parents. So they shouldn't necessarily, but they should notice as to whether their school is good. And the better the infrastructure, the better the individual school. We know a lot of the schools in this strategy have moved up from having a certain proportion of students that aren't doing well to very few that aren't doing well. So that's an improvement that the parents in that community can notice right away. And then if they step back sometimes and think about, I think probably parents are satisfied to know that Canada, Ontario is number 4, and satisfied not to know that US, which is number 20, or Waiting for Superman, which was released at the film festival earlier this week, which portrayed all the real problems there. They're quite happy to be in Canada when they see that. And so in that general sense, I think they get satisfaction out of that. But their most satisfaction is the individual student in an individual school their chances are greatly enhanced if the whole system is focusing on overall improvement.
All right, let's talk about the kids in the classroom for a minute. How does something as big as whole system reform actually affect them in their class, everyday learning?
It doesn't in the way that a child would say, trace the causes. But remember, a whole system reform is to improve each and every classroom. So that's where the benefit is. Every classroom gets improved. That's our agenda. And we've seen sheer numbers of them improve. Schools the same. So I guess I'll say they're not conscious of the benefits because they're not thinking whole system term, but because their experience is better than it would have been if the system wasn't working on the issue, then they benefit without knowing, but they do benefit.
What are your hopes for the future? What would you like to see happen in Ontario?
I'd like to see us do 2 things. One is keep going on what we call raise the bar, close the gap. So if you look at immigrants, English language learners, special education students, Aboriginal students, boys in literacy, all of those subgroups that we know we're helping to close the gap and move them up. I'd like us to keep doing that. And the second thing is to get more innovative around literacy and numeracy. There's a debate in this conference about, well, literacy and numeracy can be narrow. What about the arts? What about citizenship? What about drama and music and so forth? And that is the whole child emphasis that I see us moving more towards. So the next phase is to make it more rounded, more thorough, the more whole child. We saw it in the Singapore case very well, but they progressed to it. They didn't start there. They got the building blocks, and then when they got really solid, they've gone for this most creative extension, and I think that's the future for us.
Okay, we'll talk about that next time.
All right, well, we have the data and results to show.
Okay, fabulous, thank you.
Thanks very much, Cheryl.
I've been speaking with Michael Fullan.